Okay, so applying to college, it can sometimes feel like you're trying to crack some kind of secret code, right?
What?
We hear all this stuff about, perfect GPAs, top scores, loading up on the absolute toughest classes. Like, that's the whole formula.
Yeah, that's a checklist.
Exactly. And look, those things are definitely important, no doubt, but honestly, they really only scratch the surface of how admissions actually works. It kind of leaves you wondering, okay, how do you really stand out, especially now when it feels more competitive than ever?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it?
But what if there's a much dupper way to understand it, a sort of framework that shows how every single piece of your application is genuinely seen, how it's evaluated? Because, well, let me tell you, it's probably not what you think. Let's unpack this.
That's exactly right. Our deep dive into the source material for today really brought up these two fundamental words. Just two words, but they truly define, well, everything about how a college application is read and assessed. And these aren't just like buzzwords. They are quite literally the lens that admissions committees use to view your entire profile. Everything.
And those two critical words, pulled straight from the research, are context and evidence. And getting a handle on these isn't just helpful, it can genuinely change your whole approach to applying to college.
It really can.
So let's dive into context first. This is where things get, well, truly eye-opening, I think.
Yeah.
In college admissions, here's the real game changer. Absolutely nothing in your application is judged just on its own in a vacuum.
Nothing stands alone.
Right. Your grades, your activities, even your essays, they're all seen through this unique, very specific lens.
And what's so crucial to grasp here is just how many layers there are to this context.
Yeah.
It starts right, with your immediate world, your high school, your local community, but it even stretches out further to your state, your region. Admissions officers aren't just looking at what you did, but the specific environment where you did it and how you did it. They get that opportunities aren't the same everywhere.
That makes total sense. So, okay, with all these layers, how do colleges actually get a handle on, say, a student's high school environment? Is there like a specific document or something they use?
There is, yeah. And it's really important. It's called the high school profile.
High school profile. Okay.
It's this document that your school actually prepares. And it gets sent right along with your transcript.
Yeah.
And it's packed with vital info. The school's demographics, its curriculum, what courses are even offered, grading policies, even how its students tend to do in college admissions generally.
Wow.
So if you're a student or a parent listening, we really recommend you try and get your hands on this document from your high school. Ask for it. It's incredibly insightful.
That's fascinating. So the admissions readers use this profile to sort of calibrate how they read your application. Does that mean like an applicant from a maybe less resourced school might actually have an advantage because their achievements are weighted differently? Or is it more about finding consistency within that school's context?
Much more about finding that consistency within the context.
Exactly.
Your course rigor, how you did academically, test scores, any awards, your involvement, service hours, all of it is evaluated compared to your peers at your specific high school.
Right, compared to who else is there.
Precisely. And the material we looked at had a really clear example. The significance of an IB diploma, an international baccalaureate. It means something very different if only, say, 10% of students at a school even attempt it.
Okay.
Versus a school where maybe 90% of the graduating class gets that same diploma. The context completely changes how it's viewed, its perceived rigor.
That's a really, really important point. And speaking of rigor, our research flags something interesting from an admissions leader at Wake Forest University.
Yep.
They mentioned that Wake Forest actually uses the weight that your high school gives to AP or honors or dual enrollment courses when they determine rigor.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So if your high school says a dual enrollment course is basically equivalent to an AP,
then Wake Forest sees it that way too.
Exactly. They respect how your school sets things up. It's all about that local context again.
Which then brings us to how colleges actually look at GPAs in the midst of all this.
Right, because they're not all calculated the same way, are they?
No, definitely not. So most colleges, what we learned is they'll recalculate your core academic GPA unweighted, usually for 9th through 11th grade courses.
Okay, the core stuff.
Yeah, the core stuff. It helps them get a sense of your raw performance, apples to apples, sort of. But, and this is key, they still give significant weight to the rigor of your courses within the context of what was actually available to you at your school.
So they account for the fact that not every school has like 20 APs.
Exactly. They understand that. They're looking at what you took advantage of given the opportunities you had.
And this whole context thing, it doesn't just stop at academics, right?
Not at all.
Things like your zip code, where you live geographically, your state, even gender sometimes. Our material mentioned that being from an underrepresented area or maybe demographic could, in some situations, be a slight plus.
It adds another layer.
While on the flip side, being from an area that's already sending tons of applicants might make it, well, a bit tougher to really stand out from that specific crowd.
Absolutely. And another really critical piece of context is your intended major or, your future career interest. This can be huge.
How so?
Well, the research pointed out a specific example. Imagine a student who's really set on business or maybe pre-med, and they got a C in calculus. In that specific context, wanting to go into those math-heavy fields, that C can make the admissions process pretty difficult. It raises some serious questions about their foundation for that specific path.
I see. So it's not just the grade itself, but the grade in relation to what you say you want to do.
Precisely.
So it's not just about what you bring personally, but also how many other people are aiming for that same major with similar or even stronger qualifications.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Does that mean some majors are just fundamentally harder to get into, almost regardless of the applicant? The sources highlighted things like the explosion in applications for undergraduate business programs.
Oh, definitely. That sheer competitiveness becomes a huge part of the context.
Yeah.
It impacts how they evaluate not just your preparation for the field, but also, frankly, your odds within that very specific, often very crowded applicant pool for that major.
Wow. Okay. So that's context, really understanding the backdrop against which everything is viewed.
Right, setting the stage.
So now let's pivot to the other crucial word, evidence.
Yes.
It is absolutely fundamentally critical for your application to contain evidence, proof, showing your genuine engagement in your areas of interest, and just as importantly, your proven ability to actually succeed.
It's not enough to just say it.
Exactly. You can't just say, I'm passionate about X. You need to show it. So what does this really boil down to for the student applying?
It really means that admissions readers are, first and foremost, screening for a track record, a history.
Okay.
They want to see things you've actually done that indicate you can succeed at their college and succeed in the field you're interested in. It's less about just spotting potential for the future and much more about seeing what you've already demonstrated. What have you done?
Our source material had a really clear example here, thinking about an engineering applicant.
Right.
Okay, so strong grades in the toughest math and science courses available at your school. That's definitely expected. It's almost like table stakes.
Absolutely. That's the baseline.
But that alone is probably not going to make you stand out. Think about it. Pretty much everyone applying for engineering is going to have solid math and science grades, right?
Exactly. That's where the evidence beyond the coursework becomes so important.
Yeah.
Admissions readers are looking for concrete proof, actual evidence that a student has genuinely engaged with their interest in engineering outside of just class assignments.
And this doesn't necessarily mean like super expensive summer camps.
No, definitely not. That's a common misconception. Instead, they look for students who are taking advantage of whatever offerings are available in their school or their local area.
Like what?
Well, like joining a robotics team if one exists, or pursuing free online courses, maybe through platforms like Coursera or ADX, or even initiating their own self-directed projects, just exploring the field on their own time.
So showing initiative.
Yes. Initiative and genuine curiosity. The source material didn't pull any punches here. It gave a pretty stark warning, something like, doing pretty well in math and science and hoping to get your first real taste of engineering in college, that will rarely play out well in admissions.
Oof. So don't wait until college to actually explore your supposed passion.
That's the message. You need evidence before you get there.
That's a really powerful point. But what if a student, genuinely doesn't have access to a robotics team, or maybe there aren't specific programs like that nearby? How do they show that beyond the classroom stuff without those typical things?
That's a fantastic question, and it really gets back to that idea of context and resourcefulness.
Okay.
The emphasis is on showing initiative with what is available to you. So let's take another example. A student interested in, say, environmental policy.
All right.
For them, it means, yes, showing strong grades in relevant classes like social sciences, maybe some science, but also showing clear evidence of engagement in that interest within their own school, local community, or maybe region.
So what might that look like?
It could be joining or maybe even starting an environmental club at school. It could be initiating a recycling program, volunteering for local cleanups, maybe even starting a blog or a small newsletter discussing policy issues they care about. It's about demonstrating that passion through action, using the resources and opportunities that are around you, whatever they might be.
So it boils down to authenticity, backed up by actual action. That seems to be the core of it.
That's a great way to put it.
Which also makes me think, trying to game the system with maybe an AI-written essay, or just padding an activity list with stuff you didn't really do much in, that's probably going to be pretty easy to spot, isn't it? If the evidence isn't really there.
You'd think so. Consistency matters. The pieces should fit together. Now, how much does this expectation for evidence ramp up when you're looking at the most competitive schools?
Right. The Ivies, Stanford, MIT, places like that.
It ramps up significantly,
Yeah.
both in terms of breadth, what you've done across different areas, and depth, how deeply you've gone into specific interests.
Okay.
So these institutions, absolutely, they screen for top-notch academic excellence across all the main subjects in a really rigorous curriculum, plus strong test scores, if they consider them.
Right.
And connecting this back, the source material is crystal clear that alone is not enough for the most selective places.
Because everyone applying there is already academically amazing.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the baseline at that level.
So, okay, what is enough then? What's the extra evidence those schools are hunting for?
They're looking for really profound depth of engagement in particular areas you're passionate about. And alongside that, compelling evidence of significant achievement or contribution, real impact.
What does significant achievement look like in this context?
Well, it can take many forms. Things like getting research published, maybe founding an organization that actually makes a difference, starting a small business, maybe obtaining a patent, successfully advocating for some kind of legislation, or initiating a community program that has real, measurable results.
Wow. Okay, so it's about making a demonstrable impact beyond just participating.
Exactly. It's about showing you've gone beyond just exploring an interest to actually creating something or contributing in a meaningful way.
So if we connect all this back, it's really about drawing clear lines, making connections between your intellectual curiosity, what you genuinely believe in, your convictions, your passions, and then the real-world impact you've already started to make.
That's it. That's what really distinguishes applicants aiming for those most selective institutions.
And it's probably worth mentioning, too, our material touched on the growing role of AI in college admissions.
Yes.
With AI becoming more prevalent, maybe helping write essays or whatever, building an application that is genuinely strong on your evidence, self-generated, authentic evidence, that becomes even more critical, right?
Absolutely critical. It means applicants need to be really careful, really ensure that their application writing, sure, but also their high school courses, their involvements, their activities, their contributions, that it all truly and authentically reflects the skills, interests, curiosities, and passions they say they have.
The story has to be consistent and backed by real actions.
Exactly. Consistency, authenticity, and genuine action are just paramount.
You know, ultimately, the core advice that came out of the source material feels incredibly powerful and almost simple in a way. It was basically, the best thing you can do as a student is not try to reverse engineer some perfect application based on what you think colleges want.
Don't try to guess the formula.
Right. Instead, it's about genuinely identifying things you're curious about, things you're passionate about, maybe issues you really care about, and then focusing your time and energy on actually exploring those interests and trying to create some kind of real demonstrable impact in your community, however big or small.
It's about being your most authentic, engaged self.
Yeah, just do the things you care about and do them well.
And let the application reflect that reality.
So really understanding these two ideas, context and evidence, it truly can transform how you approach applying to college.
Absolutely.
It shifts the focus away from just like ticking boxes with grades and test scores.
Right.
And moves it towards building this compelling, authentic story that shows who you are, what you're capable of, the impact you've already started to make, and all of that viewed within the framework of your unique environment, your context.
Well said. And, that actually leads us to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. How might these principles, understanding the context for your own achievements, and needing to provide compelling evidence for your passions and skills, how might that apply beyond just college admissions? Think about, say, a job interview or pitching a project idea, or even just trying to convince a friend to, I don't know, try a new restaurant you love.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Aren't the same fundamental principles often at play? Understanding the situation, the context, and providing clear evidence for your claims or abilities is something to mull over.
Yeah.
How widely these ideas might actually apply in life.